Yeah, don't look now, but it must be rules and regulations season. We are going to talk dairy cattle transports, electronic ID tags, and I guess we're into the final minutes of the wait for the GREET model adjustments. I just wonder, are the farm markets preparing for some potential bad news for corn-based ethanol? And there's another round of some potentially severe weather on the way.
Live from the last gasp of April via Farm Journal Studios, this is AgriTalk. This morning we begin with a conversation with Ethan Lane from the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Then it's Emily Skor from Growth Energy. Later, a full segment with Bret Walts from BAMWX. Directly following the news, Karen Bonert from Farm Journal's Milk. I'm handsome newsman Davis Michelson. Now here's the host of AgriTalk, Chip Flory.
All right, Davis. Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, we got a lot of ground to cover today, don't we?
We really do, yeah.
Yeah, and some complicated issues. When you start talking final rules and getting industry reaction and everything, and the thing is, in the conversation with Emily Skor, we don't have the final rule quite yet. I wonder if it's not going to be released here within the next moments. But there's also word that it might not come out until later this afternoon when we're talking about the final adjustments to the GREET model that will either clear the path for corn-based ethanol into the sustainable aviation fuels market, or if you are to believe some of the reports that are out there, and there's no reason that we shouldn't believe some of the reports that are out there, there could be some additional roadblocks in the way of existing ethanol production, existing bio-based diesel production from soy. There could be some really significant headwinds and roadblocks, not just potholes, but roadblocks to on the pathway to sustainable aviation fuel for those markets. So we'll talk with Emily about that coming up here in just a little bit. And then at the end of the show, we're going to wait as long as we possibly can and get as much more information in as we can, or I should say let Bret get as much information in as he can before we get him on here and get the latest on the severe weather potential. Because, man, oh, man, dude, it's a rinse and repeat situation for some of those areas out there, Davis.
Yeah, unfortunately, it absolutely is. Here further south from you, we're 67 degrees and partly sunny, but the humidity is coming into the air.
Yeah.
We're looking to be around 80-ish today, if not possibly a little bit above. But to me, that just feels like storm weather.
Yeah.
You know? Heat up,
exactly.
Build the humidity, and then boom, she cracks off, and then we have a little more sun, a little more humidity, it builds back up, and I think that's the pattern that we may be looking at for the next couple of days.
Well, we will find out from Bret here at the end of the show. All right, let's get to the news. What do you got?
Well, we'll start with the National Weather Service's take. Strong to severe thunderstorms possible across the Central Plains and Missouri Valley today into this afternoon and evening. The main threats will be damaging wind and large hail, Chip. A late-season low-pressure system will bring widespread high-elevation snow and lower-elevation rain across the Pacific Northwest toward the northern Rockies through Tuesday. Chip, I've got crop progress report highlights, and I think I've got the right week this time. April 28, winter wheat 49%, good to excellent. That's down a point from last week, 30% headed. That's well above the 5-year average pace of heading. Corn 27% planted compares to 22% on average. 7% emerged compares to 4%. Soybeans 18% planted. That's 8 percentage points ahead of the average pace. Spring wheat 34% planted compares to 19% on average. 5% emerged in line with the average. And here we have cotton 15% planted compares to 14% on average by this date.
Yeah, the season is moving right along. We'll talk to Bret at the end of the show about when there might be a 2 or 3 day gap in some of the storms, so producers can get back out in the field.
Yeah. Well, South American crop consultant Dr. Michael Cordonier lowered his Argentine corn crop estimate 1 million metric ton, now at 49 million metric tons, Chip, citing variable yields and impacts from corn stunt disease. Cordonier left his Argentine soybean crop and both Brazilian crops unchanged on the week, but here we are below 50 million metric tons on that RG corn crop.
Yeah. It should have an impact on the markets before too long.
USDA's attaché in Australia forecasts the country's wheat production down 3% from the 10-year average. Trade associations representing feedstock providers, advanced biofuel producers, and low-carbon fuel customers want EPA to propose and finalize robust 2026 renewable fuel standard volumes by November's deadline. The group's letter to Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan highlights the dramatic drop in the value of RFS compliance credits because of EPA's unreasonably low 23 through 2025 volumes.
If past performance is any indication of future performance, there is absolutely no way that they will hit that deadline in November.
Indeed. Well, some 40 companies and organizations that hold a stake in the development and deployment of sustainable aviation fuel united to form the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Coalition. The goal of the new nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition is to rapidly scale investment in the SAF sector and advocate for the incentives and policies necessary to promote U.S. economic competitiveness in the emerging SAF marketplace. Farmers National Company reports overall farmland demand remains extraordinarily strong and land values are holding steady in most areas. Troy Swee, Assistant VP for Farmers National, says, quote, high-quality land continues to sell at a level comparable to the spring of 2023. He says, however, lower-quality farms and farms with a few blemishes on them have seen a 7 to 15% reduction in price. Chip?
All right. Thank you very much, Davis. Let's bring in Karen Bonert, editor of Farm Journal's Mouth. Good morning, Karen.
Hi, Chip.
Okay. So, boy, a tough issue to deal with in any industry, and here we are dealing with it in the dairy industry, the H5N1 in dairy cattle, and it's creating some changes on how cattle can move interstate. Tell us about it.
Well, sure. And I said, from the get-go, Chip, this H5N1, it's a very fluid situation. So we kind of knew that this would continue to unfold.
Yep.
But last week, and before the news broke last week, we hadn't heard a whole lot of news. And so perhaps we thought no news was good news. And well, let me just tell you, a lot unfolded, and it continues to unfold. So the latest from APHIS is that lactating dairy cattle headed to a sale barn do not need to be tested for H5N1. However, they do require a certificate of veterinary inspection stating that the animal is clinically healthy and that no testing is necessary. And really, Chip, this is huge news because testing sale animals that were going to go to slaughter would be difficult. Many times farmers don't know exactly what animals they're going to cull until a few days prior to the cattle, going on that truck.
Right.
So if they're going to have to test that animal, it was going to delay the whole process. And often, cows leave for slaughter like once a week. It's not a daily thing. Let me also say, however, lactating dairy cattle that are going to be moved across state lines that are not going to a sale barn will still need to be tested for H5N1. And for dairies that have multiple sites and across state lines, this poses hurdles because, again, the testing takes time and labor. But APHIS will provide reimbursement for testing. And that they will also mandate reporting for labs and state veterinarians to report, of course, all positive H5N1 cases.
Right.
So I just say, the story is a very fluid situation. I suspect more updates will come, Chip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely right. We need to stay on top of those updates. And it's an effort to get in front of the spread of the disease and the spread of the virus. And we need to pay attention to what is happening. Thanks, Karen. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Okay, follow the story, www.dairyherd.com. We've got Ethan Lane coming up next.
The truth is hard to come by these days unless you listen to AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm Chip Flory. Glad that you are with us on this Tuesday morning. Like I said at the open of the show, lots of rules and regulations that we're going to be talking about in today's show, and some final rules from different government agencies. And joining us right now to bring us some clarification on the traceability rule is Ethan Lane. He is the VP of Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Ethan, good morning, man. It's good to talk with you again.
Good to talk with you, too. How's everything going?
We're doing just fine. We've got It's warming up nicely. We're on our way to the mid 70s today. Right now, the sun is shining, but it sounds like we're going to get some storms in here later today. But for the moment, it's looking beautiful out there. How about you?
Well, it's 90 degrees and the humidity's starting to build. And the one good thing we get is nice spring weather here. If you take that away, this becomes a fairly unpleasant place to be.
For lots of reasons. For lots of reasons out there, Ethan. Okay, let's talk about this traceability rule. First off, what inspired the whole effort here? Because it goes back like 10 years, right?
Oh, longer than that. I mean, it goes back decades. But I mean, what we're talking about now in this new rule is really sort of a continuation of the 2013 animal disease traceability rule. So if you go back to 2013 and say, okay, you have a rule in 2013 that establishes a class of cattle that needs to be traceable when it crosses state lines. And that class of cattle is sexually intact over 18 months, moving interstate, as well as all dairy cattle, rodeo cattle, and bison. And that's basically your class of cattle that require some form of ID to move across state lines. That has been a metal ear tag since 2013, effectively, a bright tag. What this rulemaking has done is essentially say that now, starting 6 months from the publication of this rule, so about November 1st, will need to be a tag that is both visually like the metal tag and electronically readable. So that means basically an 840 tag is the approved technology currently that would fit that bill, although we would expect more to come into the marketplace. And that is going to allow states to more quickly gather information that right now has to be entered by hand, has to be transposed. And that's sort of the basic reasoning for this, is to speed up a lot of those processes and ensure that if we have a disease outbreak, that information can be accessed quickly to figure out where the problem is, and more importantly, unlock those portions of the herd that aren't exposed to this disease outbreak if we were to have one. Say FMD is a good example, foot and mouth disease. You have a 72-hour ground stop. If that were to come back on U.S. soil after 100 years, this would allow producers to say, my herd hasn't been anywhere near anything that's infected. Here's the proof. I'm going to go resume my normal activities. That's the goal to kind of deal with there. But, it's a loaded issue, right? It's data security, it's cost of implementation.
Right.
There's a lot there that producers look at and say, whoa, this is a big change from what I'm used to, and I'm really uncomfortable with that. And so it's important to know what it's not as much as it is what it is to I think, get to a point of more comfort.
Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go next. Now, if I'm taking a load of feeder cattle from northern Missouri up to a sale barn in southern Iowa, do those calves need to have an electronic ID?
No, this does not apply. This does not apply to that class of cattle. We are talking about breeding stock here that is moving interstate.
Okay, so again, understanding what is not required is just as important as understanding what is required. Fat cattle that are heading for us, that go through the sale barn system, that are making their way to slaughter, do those animals need to have an electronic ID?
Again, no. Also, not part of this rule. So that normal sort of beef production chain is not subject to that rule, and that's a touchy area because that's been you have states that have state cattlemen's associations that have policy that very much supports that. We have other states that have policy that would oppose a move like that, and this is an issue that has evolved over a number of years, and I guarantee you we don't have a cattle industry meeting, and have 6,000 or 7,000 people under one roof and bring this up without getting a lot of different opinions. And that's the nature of the industry. And that's important, right? To see where are we today? Where does the industry think we need to go here? What's our line in the sand? And what does this system need to look like for it to meet our expectations? And so that's kind of where we spend our time is really making sure we're adhering to that policy that's been given to us by our producers around the country to inform how these processes move forward.
Okay. All right. Basically, if they were required to have the metal tag, they are required to have the electronic ID tag.
That's correct. I mean, the easiest way to look at this is this is a technology update to an existing program. This isn't a
Okay.
new requirement. This is just they're changing the underlying technology.
What has been the reaction from your membership? Because, like you said, the wide variety of reactions that that people have had to this, Ethan, is pretty. I mean, it's a wide range in the reactions. There's no question about it. What has been the general reaction from your membership?
Well, Chip, I realize as a broadcaster that trades in real news and honest opinion, the room you're in is getting smaller. But there are a lot of people with a lot of money to be made, scaring the hell out of producers, making them fear something, kind of driving that conversation, whether it be for clicks or engagement or whatever else. We're certainly seeing that. We would absolutely expect to see that, right? Every theory from, this is how they're going to track methane emissions, or this is how they're going to count cattle so they can shut the industry down. If we thought any of that was even remotely true, the only thing we would be working on is killing this thing and burying its body as deep out in the desert as possible. The reality is this is a lot more mundane than that, and it's a technology update. But I think we're seeing those vocal voices on Twitter and the places you would expect to, YouTube. But then the vast majority of the industry, the folks that are involved in their state association or their county association, know that this has been going on, and we've been talking about it ad nauseum for years now. So there's nothing new under the sun here other than the rule that's been talked about in the Trump administration and the Biden administration is now final. And we have a shot clock that runs out about November 1st before this goes live. And if producers are worried about this, that 6-month window gives them the chance to get grandfathered in under the old system. They can use those metal tags until then, and put them in those breeding animals and kind of opt those animals out.
Okay. All right. Are there some funds available to offset the costs?
So we lobbied aggressively in the appropriations process last year. We secured $15 million that USDA must spend on tags and related infrastructure. And the goal there is to make sure our producers aren't bearing the cost of implementing this new rule. USDA is advising producers, go to your state animal health officials, go to your state vet, they will give you tags. So if you don't want to have to pay for these tags, you shouldn't. Go talk to your state animal health officials and they'll give them to you. And that's the idea here. We're going to keep the pressure on that to make sure that our producers aren't having to come out of pocket $3 a tag to comply with this regulation. Gotcha.
Good. I get it. I get which animals are required and which ones are not. And this is as you said, it's a technology update, and just need to be confident in how that technology is going to be used going forward. So, hey, what's the deal with the changes in the Bureau of Land Management rules on BLM use?
Oh, yeah. So the best way to talk about this is you've got a bureaucracy at BLM who has for, a better part of a century been charged with implementing multiple use. And that means recreation, that means hunting, that means fishing, that means mining, and that means grazing. But what they really want to do is not get beat up by the environmental community who sues them every time they make the decision they're supposed to make. So for a long time, they have wanted a rule change that would give them the ability to make a decision that doesn't require an actual use of the land to placate the radical environmentalists. The new BLM, they were calling it the conservation rule. It's now in final form called the public lands rule, essentially creates another class of multiple use that there's no actual use involved, right? So it's just kind of a straw man deal that allows them to say, well, the use here is going to be, locking the gate and hoping that nature heals itself. Well, anybody who manages land for a living knows active management is how you get better, ecological results out of those landscapes. That's why the cattle industry is so important as a sustainability, tool. This is the same thing as BLM Planning 2.0 that we killed 7 years ago at the beginning of the Trump administration. We're going to need to deal with this one as well. This is a relentless effort by the bureaucracy to do away with large-scale grazing on BLM lands in the West. And every couple of years this comes up, and every couple of years we got to go to battle to defeat it. Yeah.
Ethan, I think it was one of the first conversations that you and I had years ago was about BLM and grazing.
Probably.
I'm sure it was.
Right.
I'm sure it was. So, here we go again. Tackling the same situation over again. Ethan, thanks, buddy. I appreciate you, man.
You bet. Great talking to you.
All right. Ethan Lane, VP Government Affairs for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Coming up next, we're going to have a conversation with Emily Skor, CEO, Growth Energy, here on AgriTalk.
Time for Markets Now with the experts from Pro Farmer.
Joining us now, Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady. Man, oh man, Brian, take a look at what's going on in the bean market. Some heavy pressure on the HRW market here this morning as well. What's going on?
Yeah, so soybeans obviously yesterday pushed to the upside pretty notably on the Argentine strike stuff. And while it appears that strike is still ongoing, the market is pulling back significantly today. Soy oil is providing heavy spillover pressure, so it's more than 150 points lower at the moment. And like I said, the heavy spillover there. Soy meal tried to trade to the upside earlier. It's now trading well off its highs and even lower in some of the contracts. So just a general weaker tone across the soy complex here this morning.
Yeah, no doubt. And what's going on in wheat? Did it have something to do with the crop progress and condition reports?
Well, no, actually the HRW crop continues to go backwards, and the ratings are now under where they were last fall when the crop went dormant, but yet we're seeing the heavy pressure. So the SRW contracts pulled back yesterday. We're seeing follow through to that. So from a technical standpoint, short-term technical topping action in here.
All right, very good. And it's the end of the month. We got to remember that. First notice day on the May contracts. So we've also got corn is mostly 4 to 5 cents lower. Take us to the livestock trade. Some pressure there as well.
Yeah, absolutely heavy selling in the cattle market. Now, there has not been any H5N1 in the beef herd, but USDA late on Monday announced that they are testing beef samples from states that have the H5N1 virus in dairy cattle. So I think that's got the market just disheveled here and heavy selling pressure. Hogs are mildly weaker.
Good stuff. We'll talk to Brian this afternoon on AgriTalk 2. Pro Farmer editor Brian Grady.
Opinions expressed on AgriTalk do not necessarily reflect the views of Farm Journal Broadcasting, affiliate stations, or sponsors. Do you suffer from talking on the radio phobia? No problem. Send us a tweet at #AgriTalk.
Welcome back to AgriTalk. I'm your host, Chip Flory. Glad you're with us. Okay, let's continue the rules and regulation conversations on the show that we're having today and bring in Emily Skor. Emily is the CEO of Growth Energy, joins us right now. Emily, it's great to talk with you again. Good morning.
Good morning, Chip. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad that you're here today. It's supposed to be a big day. They've kind of, they've delayed this announcement in the past, but I don't think they can get around it this time. The expectations are very high that the announcement on the final adjustments to the GREET model are on their way at some point today. Give me an update. Have they been released yet?
So they have not. Treasury will release at 4 p.m. Eastern today the new 40B GREET model that will be used to determine who is eligible for the SAF tax credit as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. So we have some sense of what they are going to be announcing, but not a complete sense because there's still some things that are in a bit of a lockbox. So it is a highly anticipated announcement, but I will say big picture, I think what we should be thinking of is we're making progress and there will, this would be the first, here's the exciting news. This is the first time that you have farming techniques being recognized as reducing the carbon intensity of crops. That's actually an important threshold to cross. So directionally, I think we're heading in the right direction. But at the end of the day, I think what we're going to see in terms of the final announcement is something that isn't going to be enough. It's too restrictive. It's not expansive. And what we need is for that to be improved upon in the next guidance on the next tax credit that starts January of next year. Okay.
So the farming practices, the mention there, this is there was, the initial thoughts or process on this was that it was going to come down to some tillage practices and so on, which suggests to me that it's going to be it's going to start with carbon intensity at the farm level. Is that what you are understanding?
So that's what we expect. Yes. So again, like the good news is And I have to be careful because I know some things, but it's on embargo, right? But
Right.
so the good news is we will have farm practices recognized as, hey, if growers do this,
Right.
that will reduce the carbon intensity. I think the challenge, and honestly, my call to action for farmers and growers in the months ahead, as we look for the next tax guidance, is we have our work to do to educate policymakers on Washington in practice. If you look at agronomy, what does it actually look like? If I'm talking about cover crops or no-till or enhanced efficiency fertilizer, in practice, how does that work on the farm? And I think it's going to be clear that we have our work cut out for us in making sure you got to give farmer flexibility here. You can't be overly prescriptive. Otherwise,
Right.
that's not going to provide the incentive that we're really trying to get at here.
Right. Exactly. That's a great point. This has got to go back to some comments from USDA Secretary Vilsack that we got last week, where he basically said that this announcement is going to be a placeholder. Is what you're describing, does that describe Vilsack's comments about this being a placeholder?
That is consistent with what we are hearing from the Secretary and USDA, yes.
Okay.
And so, however, we do have to see what they say in the guidance, and you have to look at kind of what's in writing. So we will have confidence and faith, but we still, I'm a trusting person, Chip, but kind of trust but verify a little bit here. So, like listen, there's no greater champion in this administration than Secretary Vilsack, and he has a track record, and he has a track record with us. He does.
Yep.
And that
Yes, he
counts
does.
for a lot. And so he's gone out on a limb for the industry. He's worked very hard to help us get the GREET model included, to help agriculture be recognized as part of a climate solution. So we can't understate the value of those steps at this point in time. And I think what he's signaling is, hey, we're in this together. Help me educate. Help me educate. Help me bring more information and more knowledge into Washington so they can come back and they can recognize what we're able to do at the farm.
Yeah, Emily, this all makes sense to me. It's part of a process. I get that. But I will say this as well. The lawmakers that we know have been, quote unquote, champions for biofuels, and I'm looking at the Iowa senators. I'm looking at, and it's a long list of those that promote biofuels out there. It felt like they understood how important the GREET model was, and that they were sending messages. They were sending the right messages at the right time to the right people to clear that pathway for corn-based ethanol into the sustainable aviation fuels market. And it sounds like it's going to be a little bumpier than what many anticipated.
Well, I think on the GREET, yes, you're right. It's bumpier because I think what I have come to appreciate in the past several months is just how much Washington, D.C. does not understand the on-farm practices. How you sequence in different things that you're trying out, kind of the trial and error, the process, the art and the science that is agronomy. And so I think the good news is our champions did a fantastic job of making sure this will be the first time that we've got federal tax policy specific to the GREET model. So that's great. That's huge.
Okay.
But I think thinking of this as a stepping stone, as a placeholder on the road to 45Z, which is the tax credit, because 40B expires at the end of the year. That's in 7 months.
Right.
So we really have to quickly pivot to 45Z that begins January 1. What is a grower going to be in a position to do next year on the farm? Because I think where we got to have our eye on the prize.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. I get that. And this is an important topic because there is so much at risk to the industry here, isn't there?
Absolutely. This is the new market opportunity. And as we look at gasoline demand going down, it's going to be on the decline in the US because of fuel economy standards, because of EVs coming on the road. So we need a higher share of the gas tank. So we need that E15. But in addition, if this administration is signaling, hey, we really want to electrify light duty vehicles, all right, we're ready. We are ready for sustainable aviation fuel, but you got to help us help you.
Right.
to get
Okay.
there.
So tell me, there's an ethanol plant up in North Dakota. Ethanol plant up there in North Dakota that's taking the CO2 out of the side of the plant and putting it in the ground, sequestering it in underground. Do you anticipate that the ethanol from that facility will be eligible for SAF?
I anticipate, but we have to actually see the model because we've been kind of told, I mean, they are updating the model. And so we have to make sure, and we're told, I mean, we've been told that's something that would be fair to anticipate. Absolutely. That's a huge part of our industry's ability to reduce our carbon intensity.
Okay.
So I'm confident in that respect, but we've got to see the final numbers. We've got to see how it shakes out for today.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about the pipeline project from Summit. If that project goes forward and if the 50 plants get hooked up, then we don't have to talk about importing ethanol, sugarcane-based ethanol from Brazil into the southeast U.S. to turn into SAF anymore. I would assume that we would be talking about using corn-based ethanol for SAF.
Well, that's where we're trying to get. And then we also don't have to talk about importing used cooking oil from China either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and I do believe at a big picture level, I think the policymakers understand, and this is where Secretary Vilsack and the champions on the Hill have been helpful and effective, kind of in a big picture. But the details are going to come down to, you've got to give us maximum flexibility. Don't say to a farmer, you have to do 3 things and you have to do all 3 or you don't get any credit.
Right.
Say, plant, there's some things that you can do. There's some things that you can do with your grower partner. Maximum flexibility means the 45 Z-Tax credit is really going to mean something meaningful.
Yep, gotcha.
For the bioeconomy.
Yeah. Okay, I got a text from a listener. They want me to ask you something very simple. Why is EPA Administrator Regan not friendlier to ethanol?
I would have to say, actually, if you look at the record with Mr. Regan, he's done a pretty good job. We've got 3 summers of E15 waivers. This administration has a strong record on the small refinery exemptions. And so I actually think we've done some good things in this administration. And what excites me, whatever the next administration is, we can do this, whoever's in power. Republican, Democrat, we know we are an industry with bipartisan support. We got to make sure that we keep that. Excellent.
The opportunities that are available through SAF, we've talked about this on the show before, Emily, but I think it's very true. I still think it's true, even though maybe it's not going to be exactly what we want in the announcement this afternoon from Treasury. But when we are asked the question, what is going to be the next ethanol for the corn market, I think that answer is still ethanol, isn't it?
It is ethanol. And this is my call to action to agriculture. In the months ahead, we have to make it crystal clear what it means from an agriculture perspective to participate in the SAF market. Yeah. This is what we need. This is the flexibility need. This is why we need it, so we can participate. So we have that market available to us. Because you can't reach the SAF goals without us. You can't, not without ethanol.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and the same people that are probably making it difficult on feedstocks for SAF are the ones that are wondering how they're going to get all the SAF that they need. And that is also part of the frustration here. Emily, you help us understand these issues so much. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. We'll
Emily Skor, CEO, Growth Energy.
Knowledge is power. We're here to charge your batteries. AgriTalk.
Davis, the news never stops, does it?
Tell me about it.
All we're doing is trying to keep up. And if there's anybody out there that's trying to keep up more than you and me are trying to keep up with the news, it's meteorologists trying to keep up with the weather.
Oh, that's right. Especially this time of year.
Especially. Yes. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it. Bret Walts, BAMWX.com. Our buddy from Monday mornings is joining us here on Tuesday morning. And if we've got Bret on with us, there's got to be a reason. And we're looking, Bret, welcome. How you doing, man?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Well, good. You keeping up with everything that you need to keep up with? Because it looks like there's quite a bit of activity out there again.
Yeah, it's busy in the short term. It's busy in the extended range. It's busy seasonally too.
Yeah.
So it's just a busy time of year. But hey, we are rolling with the punches and hopefully having fun doing it too.
Right. Okay. There is a system right now that is there's some rain and some storms. I don't think there's severe storms, but basically from north central South Dakota down into western Iowa and some light showers tailing off into Missouri. But that front is going to break down and clear the way for another front this afternoon. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Once this activity gets out here over the next hour or two, the atmosphere should start to what I would call destabilize, start to set up shop for what I think will be a more severe line of storms that will work through late this evening, especially after 5 or 6 o'clock across western Iowa, far eastern Nebraska, eastern Kansas, and northwest portions of Missouri.
Okay, severe storm risks in this evening or this afternoon and evening.
Yeah, for sure. I think all modes of severe weather, hail is honestly my biggest concern. I think there could be some spots in especially central, southwest Iowa, maybe northwest Missouri that could have hail 2-inch plus in diameter. It's not off the table. And a couple of tornadoes. The setup isn't quite as favorable for a lot of strong tornadoes like we had late last week, but I still think it's there to support the risk that there could be a couple of them.
Yeah. Let's go back to last week, Friday, Saturday,
Sure.
and into Sunday. How unique was that setup, Bret? Because to have reports of 100, is it 120 or 180 tornadoes?
Yeah, a lot of them. I think that I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but I know, for example, the EF4 tornado damage in Oklahoma, I saw that was the first one of those since 2016. And so it doesn't happen very often where you get that widespread of an outbreak, especially for multiple days. Honestly, I'm thinking back to like the early 2010s, 2010, 2011, 2012, the late 2000s, where we had a lot of active severe weather seasons kind of in that time period. This reminds me a little bit of that.
Okay. All right. Well, that helps me put a little, it gives me a frame of reference. Because if you go back to 2008 and spring of 2008, really, and move it forward from there, you're exactly right. We went through four years of some exceptional activity and severe storms. So if we're looking at something similar, it suggests to me that we need to stay ready for this all the way through Memorial Day and even into June. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think we do. I don't really see a major change in terms of severe weather activity as we go throughout next month, or I guess next month starts tomorrow, but throughout the month of May. And initial indications are that I think severe weather activity through summer can be above normal. Those storm cluster risks that bring severe wind, I'm more concerned about that this year than even in past years. And we've had a couple of them in the past couple of years.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly right. Does the ENSO status, the transition from El Nino to La Nina, is that having an influence here?
It definitely is. Right now, technically speaking, we're not in La Nina yet. However, the atmosphere, from what we're seeing, is already beginning to respond a little bit.
Okay.
And I think ultimately that's why we're starting to see the severe weather pick up. If you think back to a couple of years like 2010, for example, that went from a stronger El Nino and into a moderate to even strong La Nina, it was an very active summer with a lot of severe weather. At 2011, that was a La Nina year, and there were certainly a lot of severe weather events that spring. And so I definitely think that it is very closely related to what is going on there. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I tell you, it was what happened this past weekend was too familiar to a lot of people that have experienced those kinds of storms in the past, and it's something that we need to be prepared for. So, Bret, don't be surprised if phone calls come your way from AgriTalk from time to time to get you on here so that we can better understand what our risks are and what we're looking at here. Summer weather, you have a webinar coming up on summer weather, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, when is it?
So that's going to be May 15th. So 2 weeks from tomorrow. It's at 11 a.m. So you can go to our website, bamwx.com/webinar. It's free for anybody to join. If you can't make it live, we do send out the video recording, but we're going to go over everything from the severe weather threats into summer. Obviously, are these drought conditions that have been around, they going to continue to kind of degrade? We've had some improvement over the past month or so.
Yeah, man.
And hurricane season too, that's going to be a big deal.
Yeah. Speaking of improvement on the drought, I was right in the middle of it up here in Northeast Iowa, and I've had one rain event that was just over 3 inches, and then this weekend was just over 2.5 inches. So, we're a long way from being back and having a full moisture profile in the soil, but hey, 5 to 6 inches of rain over a relatively short period of time is going to help us out. There's no question about it. Bret, thank you, buddy. I appreciate you. Where do we go again for information on the webinar?
Yeah, bamwx.com/webinar.
You're the best, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chip.
You bet. Bret Walts, BAMWX.com. Thank you so much for listening this morning. Great conversations with Ethan and Emily. Come back this afternoon. Brian Grady, editor, Pro Farmer.